大家好，欢迎回到 Ben 的财经频道。那从今天开始呢，我们会开一期新的一个系列的节目。我们会找一些大家现在比较感兴趣的，或者说市场上比较火热的一些项目的创始人，还有这种投资团队，来跟我们聊一聊，他们对于项目、对于市场的一些看法。那我们也从另外一个方面，或者说从另外一个角度，去找一找对于这些人来说，从他们的视角去看，那么 DeFi 下一个赛道在哪里？下一个热点在哪里？对于他们自己的项目，对他们自己的投资，他们都有什么样的看法？给大家提供一些这方面的资讯。那今天呢，我们就是请到了Pendle 的创始人 TN 来跟我们聊一聊。那话不多说，我们直接进入正题。Good. Very glad to have TN with us today. Which is the co-founder, or say the founder of Pendle Finance, which is really the hot topic in the restaking track today. And I'm really interested to, ask him a bunch of questions that I'm really interested in, especially from a product design perspective. And, to all our viewers who know me, know that I'm a person of product design. Like I've been very involved in quite a few, DeFi protocols in terms of product design, etc. And I do think that Pendle's design, especially the LP design, which utilizes the traditional XY equals to K framework on Uniswap v2, can facilitate the transaction of 3 assets. Which, bravo to you. It's really. I'm sure there are a lot of thoughts going into it, and it's really a very elegant design. And I think only those who are real DeFi degen can appreciate the elegance in such a design. So, TN, could you please give us a little bit of background into the founding team of Pendle, including yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I'm TN, one of the co-founders and CEO of Pendle. For me, my background, I started out professionally in crypto in 2017 as one of the founding team members of Kyber. So that was where I learned more about DeFi and AMM, which has heavily influenced how our team developed the product subsequently. So I stayed on at Kyber from 2017 all the way to the end of 2018. And after which, in 2019 and 2020, my group of co-founders, we were basically venturing into different business ideas together, a string of unsuccessful ventures, effectively, before we decided to build Pendle. So the motivation for Pendle was actually because we were farming shitcoins from the DeFi summer period, and we realized that there was no instrument for us to lock in the rates. Again, this was a time where shitcoins were offering 10, 20,000% in APY, and we wanted to have a venue or an instrument that we could lock in the rates, even at a much lower APY, right? Even if it's like 50 or 100%, it would still be very attractive. But yeah, to our surprise, or unsurprisingly, the said instrument wasn't around. So we started to think about the implication of having a product to the broader ecosystem. And we also contrasted the state of DeFi back then to the state of a mature financial sector. And it occurred to us that in TradFi or mature financial ecosystem, fixed income products, swaps, those are very, very important pillars. And that fundamentally became a motivation for us to look deeper into the product.
So that's a very great briefing of where the ideation of Pendle comes from. And even till today, I think Pendle is still one of those, it's probably the only product out there that successfully segregates the yield portion and the principal portion of a yield-bearing token, and successfully market the two components separately into two different audiences. We've seen other products out there. I wouldn't name names, but basically, I don't think anybody's design is as effective or as pure as Pendle's. So this goes back to one of the points that I made to some of my viewers back in the bear summer of 2023. I actually commented on Pendle saying quite negatively that Pendle, although it very successfully segregates the yield portion and the principal portion of a yield-bearing token, it doesn't really have much use cases. And bear in mind, that was back in 2023, and there was obviously no idea of restaking being such a hot topic today. So me being someone coming out of traditional finance, I can basically say this with confidence that the very reason that fixed and float interest rate swaps exist in traditional finance is because it emerges basically as a vehicle for banks to hedge its floating interest rate risks on bond issuers of like smaller companies, and it's actually to the favor of smaller companies, which is because the smaller companies, when they issue debts, banks wouldn't allow them to issue fixed interest rate debts because they're really nobodies, right? So banks only allow them to issue debts that are floating interest rate. But in order to control the interest rate risks for themselves, the banks also allow the bond issuing companies to enter into this floating versus fixed interest rate swaps, such that even though they're issuing bonds that are at floating interest rate, they can actually swap it to a fixed interest rate to pay out, and it will be the bank's liability to swap them the floating interest rate part, which the banks is very, for the banks is very easy to swap out that interest rate exposure, right? They can either net it internally within the bank, or they can swap it with another, swap dealers. So with the lack of such a demand in crypto, have you ever considered that maybe, interest rate swap, meaning fixed versus float, is not a real demand in DeFi? I do understand, by the way, that, coming from your background, you guys were arbitragers, you were doing a lot of DeFi farming, and obviously, having to borrow money from Aave and all those, DeFi lending platforms. It's all coming out of as floating interest rate, and you want to hedge that interest rate risk. But other than the very, very degen DeFi people, how would have you ever considered, or say, when you made the product as Pendle, a V1 especially, did you specifically target your clients as the DeFi degens, or did you target other people?
Yeah, so when we started out, we wanted to make a product that was catered to the DeFi natives first and foremost, because I think we were not adequate and educated enough to construct a product to target the non-DeFi natives. And if we were looking at our previous use cases, right, we have always been very specific to in our messaging, and also in our marketing materials to cater to the DeFi natives. We were aware that our target audience, not just the DeFi degens, right, but also to crypto native funds, and we were writing materials to cater to these two different groups of users, but using different content. So, for example, for the DeFi degens, they are probably optimizing for yield speculation. So the points, even before points, looking at maybe potentially getting increase or leverage exposure in the YT side was appealing to them, especially for, say, Arbitrum assets or stake ETH, right? And then on the other hand, there was also a group of crypto native funds, they were interested in the fixed income products. Again, like in the earlier part of the V2 run, like in January or Q1 last year, we were able to utilize the composability nature of Pendle and the tokens, right, to stack up yield rewards. And as a result of that, the YT was attractive and the PT was also quite attractive. So a case in point, right? ETH staking yield was trading at around 4%. This is like the typical RETH and STETH yield. Now with Pendle, because of the involvement of multiple different protocols, the implied yield that was traded on Pendle was at around 15% or so. So YT users, if they were bullish on this particular rate, they can just buy it or sell it if they are not very optimistic. And in doing so, it also creates an opportunity for PT buyers to lock in a fixed rate at a much more attractive rate. So yeah, back to your question, right? I think this has always been our view. We wanted to cater to the DeFi natives, and we think more so recently because of the interest and points, we were able to create even more attractive opportunities for the speculators who are a lot more bullish on the points because they have a lot of hope for the project, and in doing so, create very attractive fixed APY for the likes of EETH or EasyETH. I think at its peak, it was trading about 65 to 70% fixed APY. And then for USDE specifically, fixed APY was around 100% for relatively short maturity. So yeah, in all, I don't think there is. So I think the need for fixed float swap exists, but it probably exists in a slightly different form from the context. Sorry, from our typical understanding of the TradFi side.
Yeah, I think that's very well explained. So is that also why you did not rush to introduce a fixed versus float interest rate swaps to the market? Rather, you were marketing the floating and the fixed, segments of the yield-bearing token to different markets?
Yeah,
I see. Cool. Great. So since you're already talking about different components, so I want to bring this out of curiosity myself. So DeFi projects, in a way that we're familiar with, is more about Project B building on top of Project A, aka the DeFi Legos, right? So we've seen from last cycle of DeFi Summer, for example, Convex was built on top of Curve, right, to facilitate the Curve one, etc. But the other way around, Curve did not care much about Convex. However, that is not the case this time around with Pendle and all the projects they're integrating with. Very specifically, for example, if we're talking about in the context of EtherFi, you have integrated EtherFi, the EETH. You are able to decompose that EETH into the PT component, the YT component of it. And at the same time, EtherFi it's backward compatible with, not backward compatible, but forward compatible with Pendle to display the proper EtherFi points, Eigen points, and etc. of Pendle YT token holders. So I'm wondering, so that probably is one of the biggest innovation I've seen in DeFi spectrum of this time around. It's not really about how mathematics work, but it's more about how projects can integrate together without really thinking, okay, I'm the back layer of you, so I don't have to care about you, but basically more about, collaborating with each other from the bottom layer to the upper layer and backward as well. So could you please comment on that? Like, how did you come around? Is there any negotiations related to it? And how do you see this issue?
Yeah, so I think for this particular aspect, a lot of business development is actually involved. So the way we see the growth of Pendle when we started out, it wasn't just like from a product perspective, because if we look across the entire ecosystem, there are definitely a lot of very good products, but they are probably lacking in marketing muscles or business development muscles. And as a result of that, they don't get very well propagated and they don't see the light of the day. So we want to take a different approach. And we actually set out to prioritize not just iterative product development, but also to invest resources in growth and business development. So this is an exemplification of the values that we believe in internally. And because also Pendle is a relatively difficult product on its own, without any kind of use cases or case studies. It's very difficult to educate users about how Pendle could be beneficial for a certain types of user. So from that perspective, it makes sense for us to reach out to protocols that we can work very well with, and then explore synergies. So our approach has been to brainstorm angles that we can work on, and then reach out to potential candidates, which in this case, I think the first restaking project that we worked with was EtherFi. And they were gracious enough to be open to the idea of offering multiplier, and then like enabling us to trade the points, which they will also honor, and make a case study out of it. And then subsequently, when we have a very successful case out of EtherFi, it was also easier for us to exemplify or illustrate the case study to the other protocols.
And
so
may I ask, when did that conversation happen?
It was actually probably October or November last year.
I see.
So
So that was about the time that Eigen really came out and saying we're going to do this program.
Yeah. So we because we've always been involved in the Ethereum ecosystem, right? And in the first half of the last year, LST was the hype. And in the second half of last year, the community's interest in LST faded away a little bit. But because we were aware that EigenLayer is still happening, and we thought that EigenLayer, when they announced expanded capacity, the interest from the community in ETH will come back. So we never really left that part, and we were always observing what other products that we could work with. So EtherFi was introduced to us at a relatively early stage, and we were exploring ideas that we can work with. So the points trading, even though it happened this year, but the idea of that really started we started incubating the idea maybe Q4 last year. And then at the start of this year, when we started to see very healthy traction on EigenLayer and EtherFi, we went in and be aggressive with the implementation. So EtherFi make a really good case study out of it, and we gradually expanded that points trading, the notion of points trading, to the other protocols as well. So Renzo, Kelp, Swell, all of these protocols that we have an existing relationship with, we have been able to help them with bootstrapping of their traction. And then similarly, we also expanded the same kind of points trading concept to Epina and Zirkit. But in all, I think but in all honesty, I didn't think that points trading would be our product market fit, and certainly didn't think it would deliver such a massive TVL to the Pendle ecosystem.
Well, I would have thought that was quite a very good fit towards how, well, obviously coming from the perspective of trying to segregate the yield and, trying to swap the fixed yield versus the floating yield and etc. And formulated the product Pendle, but basically coming out with the product as Pendle V1, I would have thought that is probably very much fit for the points trading for liquid risk taking. Wouldn't you agree?
In retrospect, yes, but at that point, it wasn't so clear.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So, so that leads me to my next question. Since you are already doing a lot of business development negotiations with all these liquid restakers, as well as Athena and Zircus, as you pointed out, I did notice that the maturity dates of your PT and YTs very often coincidentally match with the airdrop season end dates, or with a little bit of differences, but basically matches with their season end of airdrops. So I'm wondering, are there any conversations going on in the back end that when you launch a new version or a new maturity date of PT and YTs, you're already implying that you're aware of certain airdrop dates?
No, so believe it or not, these are still coincidences. We have I'd say like we have our guesses, but these specific dates were never communicated to us.
I guess you could have never guessed that March 15th is the snapshot date of EigenLayer.
No. No chance.
Right. Yeah, sorry, carry on, please.
Yeah, so we were, I mean, typically in conversations with the other teams, we try to get an estimate, because I'm also of the opinion that it's very difficult for any one of these protocols to pinpoint exactly the dates that they want to TGE, right? So we can only make guesses. And we do relatively shorter term so that we can roll over or set up new maturity in the event that the TG doesn't happen within the first maturity. So, sorry, within the first tenure. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. Yeah,
I see.
There are too many factors that were out of the control of us and also the points issuer.
Right. So do you have any plans in terms of the adoption, or say, do you have any concerns over the adoptions of PT and YTs, especially YTs? If your maturity date is so far out or so much mismatched with the airdrop dates. So in the case of Ether5, for example, they did have a April airdrop, which matches with your April 25th YT and PT. And they are going to have a end of June, which is, I think, June 30th, which pretty much matches with your June 27th maturity date. So it comes as a, I guess, following your logic, it comes as a success to your educated guess, and also a success to the people who subscribe to the idea of your YTs. But did you have any plans over if you were so wrong, for example, that Ether5 was not going to airdrop anything on April 25th? They were going to airdrop something on May 27th. What would you have done differently?
Not so much different, actually. So if it's not, I think like the way we're thinking about it is if we would launch it end of April, and if nothing happens, then we will probably do like a end of May, so 1 month kind of tenure moving forward. So if, but at some point in time, it has to fall into the tenure, right?
Right.
It's a matter of days and the differences. And also, I think season 2, a lot of these projects, after they launch TGE, they would also do season 2 to retain TVL and also to retain user base. That helps too.
Right. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Really, this is more of a philosophical question about Pendle. So in my opinion, Pendle really is one of the very few original projects that came out of really the last bit of the previous bull cycle, and also the very few that kept on building through the bear market and then thrived in this cycle again. I don't think I can find a lot of projects that fit into that bill. So, I'll be honest that I think Pendle is lucky in the sense that Eigen came out and you were there and you're well informed to take advantage of facilitating the Eigen point farming as well as the liquid restaking token farming with the current infrastructure of Pendle. Bravo to you. But other than that, is there any other factors that led to Pendle's success?
Yeah, so I would agree with you. I think luck is a big part to play. We have been very lucky and big beneficiaries of a lot of these narratives. So of course, like aside from luck, we also emphasize a lot on experimentations internally. So I think the baseline is like it has to be a good product. It has to make sense. And then beyond that is really just slotting ourselves into the different big trends that we think could make an impact in the space, and then figure out an angle to be relevant in the specific segments. So it, again, in retrospect, I think what we've done well was in like from the start of last year until Q1 this year has been to basically was to anchor ourselves to the various narratives. So we benefited greatly from LST because we came out with maybe like $4 or $5 million in TVL by the end of 2022 when V2 was first launched. So we were still very small, and we had to figure out a way to leverage on someone else's reputation to help us grow. And we were fortunate to be able to work and collaborate with Aura Balancer and Rocket Pool to construct that LST narrative and basically slotted ourselves into that mix. Similarly, we also found an angle in Arbitrum and enabled the yield trading of GLP, GDAI, all these assets on Pendle. So when Arbitrum grew, we also grew as a result. And then Q3 last year, we found ourselves in the real world asset ecosystem as well. So basically supported the likes of Spark SDAI, and then FUSDC from Flux and Frex, SFrex. So I think like we were just really trying to anchor ourselves there. And then this year, restaking did us really good and propelled us to a much bigger, much higher state. And Ethena too. We benefited greatly from Ethena and Circuit's TVL.
I feel like you would be a good investor anyway. If you're not doing project, you will still pick the right path to go on to.
But I think like this is, I'm not sure if I'll make a good investor, but we also did quite a lot of due diligence in really just identifying the major trends, right? So if you ask me, I have no idea how the things will evolve, but my typical approach or our team's approach has been like, we have a guy, an internal research person to just identify and consume trends on Twitter, and then shortlist the projects or trends that we could potentially work with. And then from my end, and also Ken's end, we would have a lot of interactions with external parties, smart, capable individuals who have their views on their own. So let's say if we speak with 10 people, 9 out of the 10 people say we need to pay attention to EigenLayer, then we can't go wrong there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the real key is about how, to keep your resilience, to keep on building, to keep that enthusiasm in your own projects and tough through the entire bear market and keep on building, right? What you described, to be honest, a lot of people could have done that. There are a lot of people who are doing it today because this is a bull cycle, basically. There are a lot of people who are paying attention to the trends in the market. But it is one thing to pay attention to the market trends today from a person who's continuously paying attention to the market trends, even if, you know, Bitcoin has been going down for about a year and a half, and I'm still doing what I'm doing today, right? So yeah, I think there's really a lot of really resilience in your team, and I can't say enough about it. And since you you know, made a point about it, about Eigen, I'm wondering, since I know that this question is off the list, so feel free to answer or not. Since Eigen just came out this Monday about its own airdrop scheme, there's, you know, I'll be honest, there's mixed feelings in the market, as I can tell. So honestly, as Pendle, you benefited greatly from the people who are betting on Eigen to come out big, either through Eigen staking itself or through liquid restaking programs, right? But you know, Eigen has to die down at some point. We all know we're seasoned players in crypto. We know that Eigen will die down at some point. The market expectation or the market or the reality would teach the market that you know, the yield is such and such that, you know, the yield farming need or say the frenzy of restaking will probably die down at some point. So does Pendle have any plans in terms of, you know, what it should do after that?
Sure. So our view is that points trading will continue to be around because they've proven to be a very effective tool for projects to bootstrap initial traction, especially prior to TGE. So we see this going, like we see points going becoming a constant fixture in the typical life cycle of a token project, and we will continue to be involved. And I think for as long as this is true, Pendle V2 will have a position in the market. So again, like just looking at Pendle at the current state, right? Taking aside the types of assets that we've listed, what we've seen Pendle is that Pendle has been very successful in helping projects bootstrap TVL. And with this TVL growth, the projects can actually have better leverage with exchanges or exchanges like Binance or OKX. They can ask for better terms. And very importantly, with points trading, it also forms somewhat of an artificial price floor for users when they're thinking about how to price the how to price the token when TGE happens. So it serves as a reference for traders when the TGE takes place. And I think these are all like very healthy dynamics that we see between Pendle and the points issuer. But of course, I think the market sentiment in Q1 and right now in May is a little different. Q1 users are a lot more bullish, so that's why there's the aggressiveness in overbidding or paying premium for YT is much stronger compared to now. But I think this is largely a function of market sentiment, because markets are always cyclical. There will be bull and bearish times. So right now it just happens to be people are becoming a bit more pessimistic. But I think when the market or the macroeconomic conditions change some point in the future, that interest and the appetite will come back again. And I believe that Q1 is just, of course, like a lot of narrative around EigenLayer, but in the coming months, we will very likely see other forms of narratives popping out, and points will be a pretty substantial part of it. And I think internally, we're also looking at supporting, like deploying a similar kind of campaigns and playbooks to other protocols within DeFi. So for example, Bitcoin Bitcoin L2 is one that a lot of people are paying attention to. And as far as I'm concerned, a lot of big institutions already have exposure through different investments in the Bitcoin ecosystem, whether it's through Bitcoin L2 or yield-bearing Bitcoins. So that is a segment that we have a lot of hope for, and we think could potentially be a massive movement in the DeFi ecosystem. So definitely paying attention there, and we want to be involved in that segment. So I think, this is just one particular example, but along the way, there will be opportunities that we can capture.
Since you mentioned opportunities, again, being a product designer myself, I also tweeted about this, is that when you launched, for example, EtherFi, ETH 627 on Arbitrum, which you already issued the PT and YT of which on Ethereum mainnet, the PT yield of that token, of that maturity date on Arbitrum was about 60%, while the same token only yields about 40% on Ethereum mainnet. However, there was no good way to arbitrage from it, and in the same way, there's no effective way of making market to make it level between the chains of that really fungible assets. Are you aware of that issue? Do you think it's an opportunity that you can capitalize on?
So in short, yes, there will be opportunities. But I also want to point out that the ETH opportunity was relatively specific. So the difference was actually because ETH was offering higher multiplier to the Arbitrum markets compared to the ETH markets. And because the higher multiplier allows users to gain accelerated points accrual, they're willing to pay higher premium to acquire the YTs on Arbitrum relative to Ethereum.
Exactly. That's where the issue comes in, right? Because the YTs are really not really fungible, but the PTs, given their design, they're fungible, which is on June 27th, you will be, if you're holding one PT, you should be redeemable into one ETH.
So yes, I think like the liquidity between the chains can definitely help improve or improve that situation that you just described. But I think a lot of people, they were not willing to be liquidity providers as compared to liquidity providers for the bridges versus just being liquidity providers in a specific ecosystem, because the opportunity cost for them to do otherwise is actually very high. But I also want to point out that this is definitely an opportunity that we think can potentially be improved on with the implementation of V3. So cross-chain similar asset, different maturities. So all these different variables can be taken into account and potentially enable new markets on V3.
I see. Fair enough. All right. I think we covered a lot of grounds today. And honestly, I think this really answers a lot of the questions that my group especially have for you, TN, on Pendle. There's I mean, I can't say enough how my group particularly enjoys using Pendle as a vehicle to invest in restaking tracks today. It's been a real pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me.
好，那以上呢就是我们这次和 TN 的整个的谈话内容。那喜欢这样形式节目的朋友呢，欢迎在评论区和我互动，告诉我你还有什么项目是想要去了解的，还有什么人你是觉得很有意思，希望我们能够有机会能够聊一聊的。那在 视频的下方评论区告诉我们都可以来联系一下。好，那这期节目就这样，感谢大家的收看。